multiple reasons, the government has been making so many amendments in GST laws, including retrospective amendments. Consistently, circulars are issued which are contrary to legal provisions. This whole advanced ruling mechanism is revenue biased. They are issuing so many advanced rulings, laying down incorrect legal propositions, which affects industry at a large. So how we see it is that even though all of us were expecting that the litigation under GST regime will reduce, but it seems that litigation is likely to be higher than pre-GST regime. So the purpose of this series is that we'll be covering uh, this series into three baskets. Today we'll be covering mostly output side issues. In the second session, we'll be covering mainly ITC related issues, and third session will be covering other issues like refunds, etc. So the purpose is to make you aware of what issues are important for you. Some things you can take care. We'll be giving practical suggestions also how to take care of those issues. But yes, some issues may be of high stake, which are patently incorrect, which you need to live with it and might be litigate. So with this, we start our session, and between me and Anshika, it will be more like a panel discussion. So Anshika will run us through the legal provisions, etc., and I'll come to the jurisprudence and our take on the same. Yeah. So over to you, Anshika.
Thank you, Puneet. So we'll be beginning with our first topic, which is taxability. Taxability indeed is one of the most important subject in any taxing statute. For any taxing statute to be successful, it has to satisfy four elements. The first one is the taxable event, that is under GST we all know is the supply. The same was manufacture in case of excise duty and provision of service under the service tax laws. The second is the person who is liable to pay tax. Under GST, it is the supplier in case of forward charge mechanism, and it is the recipient in cases of reverse charge mechanism. The central government has been empowered to notify cases where a person other than a supplier or a recipient would be liable to pay tax. The third element is the rate of tax. The fourth element is the value on which the tax will be applicable. The definition of supply is contained under Section 7 of the CGST Act, which is an inclusive definition. It provides that all forms of supply in the course or furtherance of business shall qualify to be a supply. This includes import of service for consideration, whether the same is made in the course or furtherance of business. This also includes activities which are made without consideration. These activities are contained under Schedule 1 of the CGST Act. A classic example of these activities is the supply of services between related persons or distinct persons. Just like we had a negative list in the service tax regime, GST also has a schedule which covers those activities which neither qualify to be a supply of service or of goods. These activities are contained under Schedule 3. An example of these activities are supply of services by an employee to an employer in the course of employment. Taxability covers several issues. It can be in relation to supply between distinct persons, merchanting sale, composite supply versus mixed supply, liquidated damages, and ocean freight. We'll be taking up each of the issue one by one. Coming to distinct persons, the concept of distinct persons under GST is a novice concept. Section 25, subsection 4 provides that every registration is required to be treated as a separate and a different person. The issue that arises in respect of distinct persons is whether the supply of services between distinct persons will qualify as a supply or not. This can be understood by the way of an example. A head office has certain employees who are working for the head office as well as for the branch office, who are providing services such as accounting support, administrative support, management support. Another example of this can be liaison office, that is an Indian liaison office, which is providing these support services to a foreign head office. The question that arises is whether supply of services between these distinct persons would qualify to be a supply or not. Schedule 1 of the CGST Act provides that supply of services without consideration between distinct person and related persons is deemed to be a supply and hence taxable. We'll look at few case laws that have emerged under GST and how they treat these supplies.
So this is an issue which is likely to be most debated and disputed under GST. And this issue has multiple dimensions. So the issue is of supply also, issue is of valuation as well. And lastly, it relates to ITC. So the first issue which comes up is that if there is a head office where the management is sitting and they provide various type of support to the factories or branch offices, etc., will it be considered as a service at first place or not? So important to note that services defined under GST law as anything other than goods. So effectively, there is no definition. But yes, the definition of service under pre-GST regime is relevant, which refers to an activity carried out by one person for another person for consideration. Therefore, anything will qualify as service if someone is doing over and above which he or she is supposed to do. So now let's see in our context, if the managing director sitting at head office, he directs, say, the production head at the plant that this goods needs to be made or this should be the production strategy, etc. The managing director is not doing anything over and above what he's supposed to do. So to that extent, in our view, there is no element of service, and hence a question of service should not arise, because Schedule 1 only covers supply of service without consideration. So it should be service at first place. Discharging own duties should not qualify as service. Now let's see the jurisprudence around this. The first and most controversial ruling is Columbia Asia, Karnataka AAAR. Very important to note that in this case, the taxpayer was providing medical services and it had a head office where the entire management was sitting, and it had branches across India. The taxpayer was doing cross-charge of common expenses. He went to the advanced ruling authority asking that whether I need to include salary cost or not, and advanced ruling authority held that it is includable. So the issue was more relating to valuation of cross-charge rather than the levy of GST itself. So this is the first issue between cross-charge between a branch and a head office located within India. The second set of issues which come up are transactions between an overseas and Indian branch office and head office. A typical example can be, say, Infosys is located in Karnataka and it has a delivery office in London. So in this case, the entire management of Infosys sits in India, but as far as UK office is concerned, it undertakes customer work, customer interaction. So will it be considered as provision of service between head office and branch office? So this issue again has come up in number of rulings where the reverse facts was there, where the HO was located outside India and branch within India. So in case of Habufa Mobilin, Rajasthan AAR and Taco Holding, they held that the employees are doing work of the company only. There's no element of service, nor these will qualify as distinct persons. Whereas in case of Willem Fricke SC, the Haryana AAR took a contrary view that a transaction between liaison office and foreign head office will qualify as a service which should be subject to GST. Again, in case of Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, Karnataka AR held in favor of taxpayer. Uh, Now, uh, moving ahead, this issue is not a new concept. This issue has come up in number of occasions under pre-GST regime, specifically in service tax regime, because under service tax regime also transactions between an overseas location and Indian location of a taxpayer was treated as distinct persons and it was subject to service tax. This issue came up on multiple occasions, especially in case of various IT companies, and the courts consistently, because these matters went till Sistat level. Sistat consistently held that the employees at one location, they continue to be the employee of the main company only. They are doing the work whichever is allotted to them. Therefore, it should not qualify as service at first place and service tax is not payable. So pausing here, we have discussed the GST jurisprudence and pre-GST jurisprudence. So our take on this issue is it does not qualify as supply. Legally, GST should not be chargeable. So if you're in a business where your supplies are exempt and GST becomes a cost, you can litigate the issue. Otherwise, if it's a revenue neutral situation, then we will recommend that you do a cross charge, treating it as a supply, and let other unit take ITC of that. In the subsequent slides, when we'll be covering the valuation, we'll be discussing that fortunately government has given a lot of leeway to the taxpayers for valuing these supplies, so you can adopt any value. So valuation will never pose a challenge in these scenarios. The third aspect, which is very relevant and again under debate nowadays, is ISD versus cross charge. Again, ISD is not a new concept. It used to exist in service tax regime as well. Why it was relevant in service tax regime was, suppose there's a factory and head office. The excise duty liability was paid by the factory only, and as far as head office was concerned, it did not have excise duty liability. Therefore, the government brought in the mechanism of ISD. If ISD receives various common services for the business like advertisement, audit, etc., it can pass on SENVAT credit on such services to the factory so that it can utilize those credits. In our view, the concept continues to be the same. GST law nowhere mandates that a taxpayer needs to follow ISD mechanism. As we have been discussing, we always recommend cross-charge to the clients to avoid litigation. Therefore, in our view, ISD versus cross-charge continues to be optional, and cross-charge is a better mechanism on any day. This is also supported by FAQs which were issued by government relating to banking sector, where they clarified that a taxpayer can choose one amongst ISD and cross charge. But yeah, coming to GST rulings, in case of Cummins India, the Maharashtra AAR held to the contrary. They held that whatever services on which GST is suffered, those should undergo through ISD mechanism and other services through cross charge. And very recent ruling in case of Tata SAI Airlines, where the advanced ruling where Haryana AAR held that as far as cross charge mechanism is concerned, that should be followed for goods and ISD mechanism should be followed for services. In our view, both these rulings are incorrect. Taxpayers can or need not choose ISD, but yes, we recommend cross charge only for the business for ease of operations.
Coming to the second topic, the second is the taxability of employee recoveries. In many cases, the employer provides certain services to employees. These can be transportation services, canteen services, medical insurance services. These are usually provided pursuant to an HR policy or a contractual agreement. In most cases, the employer either doesn't recover any amount or recovers a nominal amount. Now, the question that arises is whether whether these employee recoveries are taxable. Schedule 1 provides that supply of services which are made even without a consideration between related persons are deemed to be a supply under GST. Interestingly, Section 15 treats the employer and an employee as related persons. As a result, these transactions become taxable under Schedule 1. However, in a press release dated July 10, 2017, it was clarified that where these services are provided pursuant to an employment agreement and no amount is recovered by the employer from the employees, no GST would be applicable. To the contrary of whatever has been stated under Schedule 1, the supply of services between an employee and an employer, which are made in the course of employment, are not taxable, do not constitute to be a supply, and hence are not taxable. Now, coming to the rulings that have been passed under GST.
So again, it's unfortunate that such a regular issue has again been a subject matter of debate. So an employer may provide all sorts of facilities, assets, like say, for example, laptop, cell phone, etc., to employees. So will it qualify as supply at first place? So now we'll firstly discuss the rulings, starting with Boomer India, Haryana AAR. So this case related to transportation facility which was supplied free of cost by the employer. So the authority held that because these are related persons under GST law, employer and employee, therefore it is taxable and GST has to be paid even in the cases where employer was not making any sorts of recoveries. Similar view was taken in by Tamil Nadu AAR in case of MFAR hotels, where canteen facility was supplied on free of cost basis. On the other hand, Maharashtra AAR is taking a contrary view. They are taking another extreme view. So like in case of Tata Motors, the transportation facility was provided to employees and a nominal recovery was made. The Maharashtra AAR held that it is not a supply at first place because it is not in the course of furtherance of business, nor any ITC will be available. And similar view has been taken by Maharashtra AAR in case of POSCO India, Jotun India, and Iron Trading by UP AAR in respect of medical insurance. So, so as far as employee recoveries is concerned, our take on this issue is that if the employer is providing these facilities without making any recovery, those are outside the purview of GST. In our view, whether employer and employee are related persons or not will not make a difference. If these are provided in terms of employment agreement or HR policies, etc., tax should not be payable at all. But yes, if the recovery is made, then the recovery should be subject matter of tax, but tax will be payable only on the basis of the recovery amount. And lastly, the third leg, ITC will be available in such cases unless it is barred by Section 17(5).
The third topic is the merchanting sale. Now, before delving into the taxability of a merchanting sale transaction, it is important to understand how typically this transaction operates. In this particular transaction, an Indian vendor places an order on a foreign vendor. The foreign vendor directly dispatches the goods to the foreign buyer. Here, the foreign vendor raises an invoice on the Indian vendor, and in turn, the Indian vendor raises an invoice on the foreign buyer. Interestingly, before February 2019, GST law nowhere dealt with such transactions. However, upon realization, the government made an amendment to Schedule 3, wherein the anomaly was corrected, and Entry 7 was inserted, which dealt with these transactions and held these transactions to be neither a supply of good or service. The entry reads as supply of goods from place in non-taxable territory to another place in non-taxable territory without such goods entering India. Now we'll be dealing with certain rulings that have been passed under GST.
So as far as merchanting sale are concerned, the goods are physically delivered from outside India supplier to an outside India end customer. So the general philosophy of taxation of goods is movement of goods based on place of supply rules. So in our view, even before February 2019, because these goods were not entering into landmass of India, therefore these were outside the purview of GST. As far as post February 2019 is concerned, law is very clear. And another important aspect to note is because it falls under Schedule 3, then no ITC reversal needs to be made for common services as well. But yeah, coming to the jurisprudence, Sterlite Technologies, Gujarat AAR, they did not noted even the Schedule 3 entry and still held that these are taxable. Toshiba India, Haryana AAR, they held in the favor, and SPX Flow Gujarat Air again held in the favor.
Coming to the third topic under taxability, composite supply versus mixed supply. This particular topic has had its own fair of litigation under the erstwhile regime and unfortunately continues to be a vexed issue even under the GST laws. We can understand the concept of composite supply and mixed supply by the way of a case study. In this particular case, the assessee is providing repairing service. In the course of repairing, he also provides certain spare parts. Now, the question that arises is whether the supply of repairing service and supply of spare parts have to be treated as two individual supplies, or supply of spare parts has to be treated as a supply which is incidental to supply of repairing service. In other words, there is only one supply, which is supply of repairing service. Coming to the law under GST, the composite supply comprises of two or more taxable supplies which are naturally bundled, and one of them is a principal supply. Whereas mixed supply comprises of two or more individual supplies. Interestingly, it doesn't say taxable supplies for a single price and something which is not a composite supply. While there are no fixed parameters for the purposes of classifying any supply as a composite supply or a mixed supply, however, there are, however, by the uh, however, certain parameters have been given under education guide and the e-flyer. These are perception of the consumer as to how does the consumer perceive these services to be. For example, in the instant case, does the consumer perceive it to be two separate supplies, or he is only uh, requiring supply of repairing service, the general industry practice, and the incidental supply for whether the incidental supply is for enjoyment of principal supply or not. Coming to the jurisprudence.
So again, this issue has been debated a lot under GST regime, and in the absence of very clear guidelines, it is likely to be under dispute only. Because in number of contracts it may happen. Say for example, I'm installing air conditioner at your residence and providing installation service, and typically it happens that air conditioner may attract 28% GST and installation may attract 18% GST. So as Anshika mentioned that there's a concept of composite supply, there's a concept of mixed supply, and in mixed supply the rule is that amongst those suppliers, whatever is the highest rate of GST, that will be adopted. Therefore, it is always revenue's endeavor to treat it as a mixed supply to collect higher tax. Now, coming to the rulings on this issue under GST regime, so these are the favorable rulings where it has been held to be a composite supply in case of Sandvik Asia, Rajasthan AAAR, where maintenance of equipment and replacement of parts was done. Prasa Infocom Maharashtra AAR, where maintenance of data centers was done. Latest Developers Advisors Rajasthan AAR, where maintenance, service, and supply of water was done. Switching Evo, where UPS with inbuilt battery was supplied. Janish Anand Kumar Gujarat AAR, where a pouch containing supari, lime, and tobacco were supplied. So, in our view, the underlying test to determine whether a composite supply is a perception of the customer. Does customer, in the example which I gave, as a customer, do you want to have a installed running air conditioner at your premises? If yes, then even if I enter into two contracts, one is a supply of air conditioner and installation, then also it should be treated as a composite supply only. But yes, in number of cases, it has been treated as a mixed supply, like Sandvik Asia, Rajasthan AAR, where equipments were supplied along with a service agreement. Switching Evo, which was mentioned in the previous slide also. So for UPS with inbuilt battery, they held it's a composite supply, but where the battery is separately supplied, it held it's a mixed supply. Keysight Technologies International, Haryana AAR, where electricity through grids was supplied along with other utilities like water, etc. Vertiv Energy, Maharashtra AAR, where goods were supplied from one unit and services were supplied from another unit. So in our view, there is no fixed parameter or test which can be laid down. It has to be seen from a case-to-case basis. But yes, the criteria like customers' perception, how competitors are operating, those are relevant to determine whether it's a composite supply or a mixed supply, or even a third possibility is there, which can be multiple supplies. Now, works contract is also like a contract of a building construction or fabrication or modification of immovable property. GST law defines works contract as contract for building, construction, fabrication, modification, etc. of immovable property involving transfer of property in goods. And Schedule 2 deems works contract as composite supply only. So wherever in a contract, both goods and services are supplied and the emanating property is immovable property, it will be treated as works contract. Again, it's not a new concept. It used to be there under VAT and service tax regime as well. But yeah, as far as GST regime is concerned, we feel that the position is fairly settled because of the definition, and even the advanced rulings have been taking a correct view, like EMC, WB, AAR, IAC Electricals, again West Bengal AAR, EMCO Maharashtra AAR, and Cable Corporation Maharashtra AAR. So what is a test which these contracts, these advanced rulings have held is that yes, the resultant property was immovable property only. So the authorities went into the underlying contract. They found that even though the agreements were distinct, but those agreements had a cross-fall breach clause in which, say for example, again going back to the air conditioner installation example, even if I enter into two contracts, say the contract for supply of air conditioner says that I'm responsible that the air conditioner is in proper working condition. So both the contracts are interlinked and imposes single responsibility on me. So these are the tests which have been taken for classifying these contracts as works contract.
Now coming to the next concept, it is the concept of liquidated damages. Liquidated damages are usually payable wherever there is a breach or non-performance of a contract. These damages can be in the form of simple damages, penalty, compensation. This also takes nature of notice pay. So in notice pay, the employee is under every employment contract, an employee who wishes to leave is required to serve a mandatory notice period. However, in certain cases, the employee requires early termination upon payment of an amount which is known as the notice pay amount. The question that arises is, how would these liquidated damages be uh, taxed? Schedule 2 treats these following as a supply of service. One is agreeing to an obligation or refrain from an act or toleration of an act. Interestingly, the advanced ruling authorities as well as the department has went on to interpret toleration of an act as that whenever an employer allows an employee to leave early upon payment of notice pay, he is tolerating the act of an employee by releasing him early, and hence the notice pay amount is liable to GST.
Disputed topic. Say for example, you engage me for providing an opinion, and I charge 1 lakh fee for that, and you ask me to provide opinion within 1 week. And the contract says that if I delay provision of opinion beyond 1 week, then I'm liable to pay a compensation of 25,000 rupees to you. So the question is, what is a service? In our view, service is an economic activity. Why have you put this clause of 25,000 damages? You have put so that to put me to check that I deliver my services within time. Therefore, in our view, as far as you are concerned, you do not provide any service to me. If I'm paying 25,000 rupees compensation in case of delay in giving of opinion. So to understand these clauses of agreeing to an obligation, refrain from there can be example economic activity, and we enter into contract that you say that I'll pay 5 crores to you. You do not enter into legal services profession for next 5 years. So in that case, is economic activities not enter into next 5 years. So those are the things that are agreeing to an obligation and not damages, penalty, whatever. But yes, as far as GST rulings are concerned, all the rulings have consistently taken a negative view. SEZ unit was Haryana State Warehouse for delay in delivery of goods, fast track Gujarat AAR, where there was forfeiture amount for breach of sale of land agreement, Amneal Pharmaceuticals Gujarat AAR, it was relating to notice pay. So you will see that all these are in the nature of damages, penalty, compensation, etc. And in our view, to that extent, these rulings are incorrect. But yes, pre-GST, there is sufficient jurisprudence holding correct legal positions, starting with Southeastern Coalfields Sistat ruling relating to penalty on short-lifted or unlifted quantity of coal, cane food industries, where ex gratia compensation was given to job worker Repco Home, which related to foreclosure charges for closing loans before stipulated period, or GTND or HCL Learning, Madras High Court in Sistat judgments, which related to notice pay. So in all these rulings, the courts have consistently held that the liquidated damages, by whatever name called, this is not what the service recipient does for the service provider, and therefore it's outside the ambit of service tax. In our view, these rulings equally apply in GST regime as well, and to that extent, GST is not payable.
Coming to the last issue on which taxability issue usually arises is in case of ocean freight. We'll first delve into how this transaction operates. In these cases, an importer who's located in India purchases goods from an overseas supplier on CIF basis, that is cost insurance freight, where the overseas supplier is required to undertake all expenses in relation to freight. The overseas supplier engages. Section 5 of the IGST Act, which forms the charging provision, empowers central government to notify services tax. The central government has notified services which are provided by overseas shipping line. In this case, the overseas shipping line to the overseas supplier. Uh, the importer of goods has been made liable to pay tax, has been made liable to pay GST under RCM. Interestingly, the importer is not the recipient, and the notification has proceeded to impose tax on importer, which is against the main parent legislation.
Now, coming to the jurisprudence, so as Anshika was mentioning that the shipping line is never engaged by the importer in India. The privity of contract or the provision of services between overseas shipping line and overseas supplier only. To that extent, the liability to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism can never be imposed on importer. And to that extent, there are favorable rulings starting with Mohit Minerals, Gujarat High Court. The revenue has filed an SFP against that, which stands admitted in Supreme Court. MCPI, Calcutta High Court. And importantly, pursuant to Mohit Minerals, there are other rulings as well of high courts where even the refund of GST paid has been granted by Gokul Agro Resources, Gujarat High Court, and Bharat Uman. But yes, again, our take on this issue will be that if it's a revenue neutral situation, if whatever GST paid is available as ITC, so unless you are in a business of exempt, it's better to pay GST on ocean freight and take credit. But yes, if it becomes a cost for you or you're an inverted tax scenario, etc., then you should surely litigate. In pre-GST also, in case of Sal Steel Authority, Gujarat High Court held that GST is not payable. So with this, we come to end of the taxability part of the webinar, which covers almost 60-65% of today's content. Now we'll move to the valuation.
Coming to valuation. The valuation provisions are contained under Section 15 of the CGST Act, which provides that in case where supplier and recipient are not related and price is the sole consideration of sale, the transaction value shall be adopted for the purposes of valuation. This transaction value includes any taxes, duties, cesses, which are chargeable if charged separately, any amount which is incurred by the recipient on behalf of the supplier, any incidental expenses like commission, packing charges, etc., interest, late fee, penalty for delayed payment, and directly linked subsidies, which exclude subsidies received from central government or state government. The discounts which are given by companies to the dealers or any discounts which are given are excludable from the transaction value. However, they need to qualify the condition. If these discounts are given before or at the time of supply, these discounts are required to be indicated on the invoice. In case these are not indicated on the invoice, they would not be deductible from the transaction value. If these discounts are post-sale discounts, it needs to be established from the agreement that these discounts were required to be given and corresponding ITC has been reversed by the recipient. Coming to taxability of discounts, in respect of discounts which are given by companies to the dealers or any further distributors, these are given post sale and hence these are given by the way of issuance of a credit note. These credit notes are either commercial notes, commercial credit notes, or GST credit notes. With respect to these discounts, the company adjusts its sales turnover with the credit note amount, and the dealer in turn adjusts it from the purchases or records it as the income in the P&L account. There was a circular 2019, which was issued, which provided for secondary discounts, that is, those discounts which are not known at the time of supply, and those are given post supply, that is, after the supply has taken place. These are includable in the value of supply. Pursuant to this, another circular was issued in 2019. This circular discussed three scenarios. The first scenario, where in case of post-sale discount, there is an obligation of the dealer to perform an activity. These discounts are not includable in the value, subject to fulfillment of condition of section 15(3)(b). That is, these either have to be mentioned on the invoice, or these should be given pursuant to an agreement. Post-sale discount, which casts an obligation on a dealer to undertake activities. For instance, if these discounts are given, the dealer is required to undertake some promotional activity and is under an obligation to do so. In these kinds of discounts are includable in the transaction value, and dealer is liable to pay GST on these. The third is the discount which is offered to augment the sale or to increase sales. These are also included in the value of supply. This circular created a lot of hue and cry in the industry, and due to which the revenue withdrew this circular by the subsequent circular, which was issued on October 3, 2019. Now, understanding how discounts operate, the manufacturer would further a discount to a dealer. These discounts could be provided on account of achievement of any purchase turnover or sales turnover. The question that arises is whether these discounts are deductible from the transaction value or not, and what would be the ITC implications on the same.
So again, very unfortunate that such a regular industry practice, there is so much confusion. So there are four type of disputes which are happening in relation to discount. One, whether these discounts are deductible under section 15 or not. Secondly, whether these discounts are to be treated as additional consideration for the dealer. Thirdly, whether these discounts are towards services which are rendered by dealer to the main manufacturer. And fourthly, whether in respect of these discounts, any ITC has to be reversed or not. And again, total confusion in the industry, contrary circulars. Even on the GST Council's website today, there is a draft circular which has been put, which has not been issued till now. If you see that, that clarifies all the issues in a proper perspective. But yes, till then, we are seeing clients being regularly questioned about all these issues. Coming to the rulings in GST, Santosh Distributors, Kerala AAR, they held that because these discounts are intended to augment sales, therefore GST credit note cannot be issued. Similar view taken in case of Ultratech Cement, Maharashtra AAR, which was in relation to rate difference to dealers. So both these rulings related to deductibility of discount or through credit notes. In Quality Mobiles, fortunately, it's a favorable ruling for volume discounts. It says that it is not towards a service rendered by dealer towards the OEM. And lastly, in case of MRF, again, fortunately, a positive AAR which came after the circular, etc., Tamil Nadu AAR, where they held that ITC related to discount on procurements need not be reversed. And yes, in pre-GST also, the jurisprudence has started emerging now. Rohan Motors Systat and Toyota Lacozi Auto Systat, where they held that these discounts and incentives relate to sale of goods and not towards provision of service.
Now coming to the issue of valuation, as Puneet discussed previously, in cases where the head office is providing certain services to branch office, which could be in form of accounting support, administrative support, or management support, the issue that arises is what would be the valuation that would be adopted in these cases. Rule 28 of the CGST rule provides that valuation in these cases would either be the open market value. In case the open market value is not available, the value of supply of goods, services of like kind and quality, or the value which is determined under Rule 30, that is the 110% of cost of production, or Rule 31, which is the deductive method. The first proviso to Rule 28 provides that in case where these goods are supplied as such, the value will be 90% of the price charged to an unrelated party for like kind and quality goods by buyer. The second proviso provides that in case uh, in okay in case the recipient is eligible for ITC, the invoice value shall be deemed as the open market value.
So, fortunately, a very positive provision to eliminate disputes. In our view, apart from other aspects, the second proviso assumes a lot of importance because most of the taxpayers operate in businesses where whatever stock transfers are done, cross charges are done, ITC will be available to recipient. So, so the question which came up before the advanced ruling authorities was that what value should be adopted? Can a taxpayer, if his other unit is entitled for full ITC, can he go to the second proviso straight away? So the advanced ruling authorities have held in the favor. They have held that if the recipient is entitled for ITC, you can adopt any value. So we have rulings in case of spec maker opticians, Tamil Nadu AAAR, and GKB Lens West Bengal AAAR on this issue. With this, we come to the last topic of today's webinar, which is relating with the place of supply.
Place of supply holds utmost importance under GST, as this would determine that whether a transaction will be an interstate supply or an intrastate supply. The place of supply in under GST is either the location of supplier or recipient. Section 10 is a general rule which provides for various scenarios in which the place of supply would be the place where the delivery terminates and other cases. Apart from the general rule, the place of supply has been held to be different in case of different scenarios. These are in case of import and export of goods, the location of immovable property, place of supply in case of performance-based services, the location of event and intermediary. In subsequent slides, we'll be discussing place of supply under each of these scenarios. Coming to the first scenario, in this case, the purchaser who was residing in Trivandrum had gone to Pondicherry for the purposes of purchase of a vehicle. He purchased the vehicle in Pondicherry where the ownership of the goods was transferred. However, the car being an expensive car, he requested the seller to transport it to Trivandrum. The question that arises is what would be the place of supply? Section 10, which is the general rule, provides that supply involving movement of goods, whether by a supplier or recipient or any other person, in these cases, the place of supply would be the location where the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. It would be interesting to see what would be the scenario in case of ex-work supplies, as the ownership is transferred on the factory gate itself and it does not involve any movement of goods. We'll be discussing the jurisprudence that has evolved under both scenarios.
So the main question is where the location what is the location where movement of goods terminates. So in case of X work supply, the movement terminates at seller's premises only. But at same point of time, we need to be cognizant that the goods are going. So again, contrary rulings on this issue, Kuhn Motor Company, Kerala High Court, even though it was relating to a place of supply rule, it will be considered as local only because the ownership got transferred and delivery terminated at seller's premises only. But we have Penna Cements Telangana double AR, in which it was held that it will be treated as interstate because effectively our goods are moving outside the state. So in our view, the issue is again highly debatable, and the correct legal position is it should be treated as a local sale only, which is intrastate. The way the legal provisions are worded, but logically it should be interstate. So all of you need to be cognizant of this. At same point of time, it will be relevant that you can consider restructuring your transactions in a way that you can convert into FOR or you can convert into X works and take freight responsibility on yourself. In that case, it will clearly become an interstate transaction.
Now, coming to place of supply in case of performance-based services, this can be discussed by way of a case study. Here, the foreign associated enterprise sends the goods for research and development. These can be blood samples or any other good on which some testing needs to be done. The Indian company performs the test on the same, and the test reports are thereafter dispatched to the foreign associated enterprise. The question that arises is, what would be the place of supply in case of these services? As per are required to be made physically available by the recipient. Here, the goods were required to be made available in India, on which testing was required to be done, or to recipient or person acting on its behalf, requiring physical presence with the supplier. In these cases, the place of supply would be the location where the services are.
India is trying to become an R&D hub. We see so many multinational companies setting up R&D centers in India. So this issue becomes very important for all of them. From a legal perspective, the whole of these performance-based services, this rule or these provisions were created to cater to a situation where the goods become subject matter of. So say, for example, I send a equipment, say I'm located in Sri Lanka, I send the equipment to India for getting it repaired. In that case, the subject matter of performance is those goods only. Whereas in case of R&D, many times the materials are procured by Indian company only, or even these materials are taken only for the testing purposes. But the ruling consistently, these have been negative in case of Behar, Maharashtra AR, and Cliantha Research, Maharashtra AR. They have held that these are performance-based services. But yes, pre-GST, there is sufficient jurisprudence holding correct position of law, including High Court. SGS India, they held it's not a performance-based service. Therefore, if recipient is located outside India, service tax is not payable. Sai Life Sciences Stat, Advenus Therapeutics Systat, except for one ruling in case of Sai Life Science only, there are contrary rulings which held to the contrary.
Now coming to place of supply in case of intermediary services. In case of intermediary services, the Indian company provides marketing, promotion, or back office or back-end services to the foreign counterpart. The question that arises is, what would be the place of supply in these transactions. The underlying law is an intermediary means a broker, agent, or other person who is arranging or facilitating supply between two or more persons, and it excludes services on own account. In case of intermediary services, the place of supply would be the location of supplier. Recently, the CBIC had issued Circular 2019, which regarded the back office services as an intermediary services. Interestingly, this particular circular totally ignored the jurisprudence that had evolved under erstwhile laws, and whether the requirements that were required for a company to form an intermediary were being satisfied or not. This, without getting into the intricacies of same, it straight away held that these were intermediary services. As this created a lot of chaos amongst the industry, the government subsequently withdrew this circular on December 4, 2019.
Yeah. So this is the last topic which we'll be discussing today. So again, very, very unfortunate, this intermediary also highly debated, disputed topic. So the whole purpose of intermediary, and as we saw from the definition, was to cover typically commission agents. So say, for example, A wants to sell goods to B, and I am a commission agent who facilitate those supplies. Then I should be, and back office is there. So back office, it may not facilitate supply of goods or services between two people. It may be like a customer service support or a call center to address to the queries. So unfortunately, the advanced ruling authorities have treated even such transactions as intermediary, whereas legally they are not. Again, on this issue, GST Council promised that they will issue a clear circular after withdrawing that circular. Even that has not been issued. And we see clients getting regular show cause notices and disputes on this issue. So material recycling, Gujarat High Court, it was more on the validity. They held that the levy is valid. But yes, apart from that, Sabre Travel Network, Maharashtra AAAR, Toshniwal Brothers, Karnataka AAAR, VServe Global, Maharashtra AAAR, Asahi Kasei, Karnataka AAAR is the only exception which has taken a positive view. And Fulcrum Info Services, Karnataka AAAR. Whereas as far as pre-GST regime, there is sufficient jurisprudence, Verizon India, Sistat, Lubrizol, Sistat, and GoDaddy AAR in service tax regime, where they lay down correct principles that these back office operations will not qualify as an intermediary service. So with this, we come to end of our presentation. So over to you, Sameerji, if you want to take any question answers or you want to add anything, because we had a lot of content to cover. So
no, I understand.
Yeah.
I see that a couple of questions. Are you able to see those questions, Punitji? There are two questions lined up, in fact.
Yeah, just 1 minute. Yeah, so should I take up those questions?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. So one is by Mr. Rahul Patil. Recovery of notice pay is part of service contract. Further, employees not foregoing any benefit or considering. Can we take such stand to avoid applicability of GST on notice pay? So Mr. Rahul Patil, you are absolutely right. So this should be the ground that as far as employer is concerned, he is not doing anything for the employee. And in fact, that's a compensation which the employer is getting because his work gets hampered because of employee leaving. Plus, as we mentioned, HCL and GE, those are rulings directly on this issue, including Madras High Court. So GST should not be applicable. Mr. Surinder Singh, which document to be used to goods transfer within same state and same GST number. So sir, it should be delivery challan only for such transfers. And I request others also, if you have any questions, you can put it on the Q&A box.
Or they can also unmute themselves and ask the question live.
Sure, sure. And if you have any questions, you can raise your hands and you can ask your questions live as well.
Yes, Khandelwal, Vijay Khandelwal ji. You can unmute yourself, sir, and you can ask the question.
Sameer, have you unmuted him from your end?
Yes, just a moment.
I think firstly you need to unmute.
Just a moment. Vijay ji.
Hello.
हाँ विजय जी, खंडेलवाल जी बोलिए सर.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes sir, yes sir.
Yeah. Now, this supply to employee and recovery part, there was a audio problem. So can you just repeat in short if possible?
Yeah, sure. So Vijay ji, the summary is that if you're providing any facility to employee free of cost, say for example, canteen, bus, etc., that should not be subject to tax. If you are providing any facility at subsidized rate, say for example, you're providing canteen facility, which was worth 100 rupees and you're recovering 40 rupees from him, then on 40, you should be liable to pay GST.
Oh, suppose we are recovering a token amount, say rupees 2 rupees or 5 rupees. Just that is just admin control, that's all.
Yeah. So on 2 rupees or 5 rupees, you are liable to pay GST.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Sameer ji, then we have Mr. Nitin Parab.
There is one question by Sri Ashwin Tanna ji.
Acha, okay.
There are a couple of questions. In fact, there are 3 questions in the chat box.
Okay. I'll just take that. When one nation, one tax ruling given by different states, the AR or triple AR should be applicable to Pan India. Mr. Ashwin, you're right. Ideally, this should have been the situation, but I'll share you a recent example. This Maharashtra GST authorities, they have issued a circular that CBIC circulars are not binding on them. So they will decide on a case-to-case basis which circulars are binding. So for last couple of weeks, they have issued multiple circulars that these only are binding on us. So this should have been the ideal, but unfortunately, country is not proceeding on that. Then we have Mr. Rahul Patil. Materials like cement, like steel and cement handed over to contractors for execution of works contract. Can such material are part of valuation? Contractor need to charge GST? So Mr. Rahul, answer is no. So I understand in your case, it was responsibility of service recipient only to arrange these goods. So it will not be taxable. Mr. S. Kumar, in a works contract involving construction, electrical installation is paid separately, not forming part of contract value. Will that be considered as transaction value? Yes, sir. It will be composite supply, needs to be included. Mr. Jitendra Kumar, in case of related party, if ITC is available, then can value be taken as more than selling price? Yes, sir, it can be taken. So Sameer, this chat have been answered.
Yes, sir.
Then there are 3 more people who have raised hands.
Okay.
Mr. Nitin Parab.
Just a minute.
Yeah. I think you need to you need
just
to mute Mr. Vijay Khandelwal also.
That is done.
Yeah, Nitin Parabji, you can ask the question. Nitin Parabji, you can ask the question. You are unmuted.
Nitinji, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Samirji, have you unmuted from your side?
Yes.
Okay.
I've already unmuted.
Yeah. Nitinji, you can unmute and ask.
Sir, I am audible.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Hi, yes,
you're
sir.
audible.
Sir, I wanted to ask about the composite supply. Sir, regarding composite supply, when I am supplying the equipment, and also I have a separate price maker for installation, commissioning, and then training. So I am required to raise a separate invoice on the customer for one is supply of equipment, another invoice for installation. And another invoice for then training subsequently. So which HSN I should use, because these are the three different invoices.
Can you repeat the question, sir? I think we missed it.
Yeah. My question is, like, if I'm raising the three separate invoices for supply of equipment, another for installation of that equipment, and third is for training. So there are three different invoices at three different stages. So which HSN code I should use for each invoice? Because first invoice I will definitely use HSN code for equipment, and subsequent two invoices I may be using HSN code for service, because I am providing installation service, and third is I am providing this training, maybe training to the my recipient staff. So can I use a different HSN code, or I have to use HSN code of the principal equipment in all the three invoices?
Okay. So Nitinji, as we discussed, it will totally depend upon intention of the parties and the contract, how it is worded. But my view based on our discussion is that as far as client is concerned, he would want that an installed equipment and his employees being trained to use that equipment should be available at his facility. So it should be a composite supply irrespective of number of purchase orders and number of invoices. And on all three invoices, you should use HSN and rate of equipment only.
Okay, but sir, if I use HSN of suppose goods in training, then again I have the unit of measurement also I have to change accordingly, because for HSN code of goods I have to use quantity only number, or maybe in kg or something. So whereas installation service is like one job. So my unit of measurement will be one job, whereas the HSN code will be of goods. So whether it will make any issue, particularly from e-way bill perspective?
No, it will not be an issue. It will not be an issue, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Subhashri A.
Hello. Good evening, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, ma'am. Yeah.
The session is highly informative and very good. My questions are relating to Vijayji's and Nitinji's questions only. One is regarding canteen facility. Vijayji said they will be charging only 1 or 2 rupees for administration purpose, maybe for attendance of the employees who are taking food in the canteen. How is that if we pay on 1 or 2 rupees, it suffice the provisions? When there is related party open market valuation we have to take.
Okay. So ma'am, as I was explaining, say for example, for a meal, the cost is 10 rupees and you are charging 1 rupees from the employee. So even CBIC clarified that whatever is given by employer to employee under employment arrangement, and in my view, employment arrangement will also cover the HR policies as well, that should not be subject to tax. So how I see is that meal worth of 10 rupees, you were obligated to provide 9 rupees worth of meal under the employment arrangement. So that's outside the purview of GST. 1 rupee, 1 or 2 rupee, which are actually recovering from him, that only will be the assessable value.
Okay, so you mean to say open market value in this scenario, when it is been included in the agreement, it will not be affected.
Right, ma'am.
Fine. And regarding Nitinji's question, when there is single PO, purchase order or service order, raising two or more invoices, will it protect the concept of composite supply? When there is single PO, but in order to maybe as a matter of tax planning and all, I raise two invoices, then will it not be effective, like composite supply will not be related in this case?
Yeah. So, ma'am, in my view, number of POs, number of invoices are not relevant. It will totally depend upon the intention. So, if we take example of the installation, if you want to get a installed equipment at your premises, then it will be treated as a composite supply and rate of equipment only will apply.
Fine. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Sanjeev Bharadwaj, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Puneet.
Good afternoon, Sanjeev ji.
How are you, sir? Fine.
सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है सर.
Hello. Just
हाँ जी सर.
you just
Sanjeev ji, can you be loud? You are not audible.
hello.
Sir, आवाज बहुत हल्की आ रही है. Hello.
Hello, I am audible now.
No, sir.
हाँ बोलिए सर.
हाँ, चलिए.
There is a query regarding capital goods purchase. I purchased some capital goods before GST regimes, and if there is a provision, if clear the goods earlier, so there 2.5% reduction per quarter was available as a reduction in the asset value while I am clearing the goods. But goods purchased before GST regime was now clearing in GST regimes. So what percentage would be applicable? Now I think it is 5% per quarter.
Okay. So Sanjeev ji, in my view, neither 2.5% nor 5% will apply. 2.5% will not apply because we are out of SENVAT regime. 5% will not apply because these are not the goods on which ITC is taken. So in my view, the simple assessable value will be the sale price only.
Okay. But if we purchase after in GST regime, then and clear in GST regime, then 5% would be.
Yeah.
applicable.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Puneet. I think we are through with all the questions.
Just couple of questions, Samir ji, have come on the chat box. Maybe we'll just take up that and then end.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are the last two questions which we'll be taking up. Vaishali Jain, if tax is paid on meal recovery at 5%, will ITC of common reversal will be required? So, ma'am, yes, answer is yes, because 5% is subject to ITC reversal. Jitendra Kumar, as per contract, if assessee raised debit note to vendor on account of loss incurred due to mismatch of ITC, will this transaction attract GST considering agreeing to obligation? So, Mr. Jitendra, I consider two aspects of it. One, I understand that the debit note will only for the ITC amount, which you initially took from him. So if you're recovering that, then effectively it means that you are not paying GST to him. And over and above that, if you penalize him for anything, so as we discussed, this liquidated damages should not be subject to GST at all. And therefore, this should not be covered under agreeing to obligation. So Samirji, should we close it now?
Yes, Puneet ji, I think we have covered all the queries as well, and it's over. So we can close the session. And thank you, Puneet ji, for such a wonderful session. And it was, I'm sure it must have been very useful to all the participants. And as I said, there are two more sessions going to come in couple of days, I mean in next couple of months. So we will cover whatever left out in this program on this session, whatever we have left, we'll certainly try to cover those in next couple of sessions. Yes, Puneetji, it's over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sameerji. Thank you. It was wonderful associating with you. And thank you to the participants also for joining in large number. And Sameerji, just I want to compliment you for the VIS. We found it very useful in our firm. The quickness with which the rulings and updates are shared, even the case notes, research facilities. So I just want to compliment you for the search engine, for the facility which you are
Thank
giving.
you. Thank you, Puneetji. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So with this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thank you.